Welcome to the Middle-earth Philosopher, where I take a look at people, ideas, and events that happen within the world of Middle-earth and try to examine them from a philosophical point of view that may have been thought of in that world. I wanted to talk about the philosophy of the spectrum of the roles that women play in Middle-earth, both within universe and a little bit without, as some of this was motivated by some real-world criticisms that I recently read. In recent years, Tolkien's universe, celebrated as it is in modern culture, has been caught up in the cultural self-examination of how we see women and what their roles are in society and how we used to treat them. In particular, Tolkien himself has been accused of making women into princesses in high ivory towers, maidens in need of saving, even though characters like Eowyn are very much well known in pop culture. People wanted to be the Eowyn of their story, not the Arwen. This, however, communicates a lack of knowledge on Middle-earth history, as well as the broad spectrum that women cover in that world. For sure, there are classic princesses in Middle-earth, but even these don't completely fit that archetype that we think of. The most famous, perhaps, being Luthien, both for the metaphor of her as Tolkien's wife, and for being the ancestor in the story of the lineage of future kings. Her story starts out of that as a princess in waiting, being imprisoned for her own good by her father, High King Thingol of Doriath, because of her love affair with a mortal refugee and survivor named Beren. However, rather than wait for her hero to return, she displays agency and takes control by escaping herself to rejoin him. The two save each other multiple times, and it's only together that they accomplish Thingol's impossible demand to recover one of Feanor's jewels from Morgoth's crown. Does she marry her hero? Yes. Is she relentlessly loyal to him? Yes. Does she give up near everything for him? Yes. But this is not one-sided, as Beren has done equally as much. The other class in the trope being Galadriel, princess as well, being a daughter of Finarfin, High King of the Noldor that remained in Valinor. She is often portrayed as regal, with a royal pose, and being the wisest of the elves, as well as being the second oldest elf still remaining in Middle-earth. She is not usually seen on the front line or as a frontline combatant, but she is extremely powerful. Because of her reserved nature, she is assumed to be more traditional. However, it's noted in the appendices that she did see action during the War of the Ring, and that she could not be defeated unless Sauron himself engaged her with the One Ring. Moreover, in the Silmarillion, she is noted as being very ambitious, with a desire to rule, if not as a tyrant. She has a hostile relationship with her uncle, Fëanor, whom she believed had a darkness in him. And she is well traveled, having lived in all the major areas of Middle-earth except the far east and south of the world. These are the two typical known tropes for the princess-in-waiting character, but as I said earlier, even with these, they're not entirely accurate to that stereotype. But there are others as well, besides being a much greater spectrum. There is the character of Arthel, a Noldor cousin of Galadriel, and is arguably what you could say Middle-earth's first feminist, if you want to go that far. Arthel is highly independent, and the daughter of King Fingolfin. She actively hunts and rides alongside the sons of Fëanor, despite the feud between their two families, even though she is never romantically linked to any of them. I, in fact, interpret it as a kind of adopted sister type relationship, but that's just me. She is noted in the Silmarillion as being rebellious and prideful, and very difficult to control, even by her brother Turgon, who was High King of Gondolin at the time. She only becomes more tame after being tricked into marrying Eöl and having a son with him. There is also the story of Haleth, of the mortal Edain tribe of the Haladin, back during the first stage of Middle-earth. She is one of the leaders actively defending the tribe from assault alongside her father and her brother until they are both killed. Left on her own, she fiercely encourages the Haladin to fight, even though they are now near total extinction, until they are rescued at the 11th hour by the Noldor, led by Prince Caranthir. However, despite being rescued by a high elf prince, she is not taken by him or in swoon with him, as one might think, and many fans have projected. Rather, when Caranthir offers her their protection if they sign up to join his alliance, she respectively declines. This is because Haleth is known for being fiercely independent and also fiercely stubborn as well. Even though it's credited that all her people are like this, she's the most well known for it, which is why the people ended up taking part of her name. And beyond the First Age, you have the High Queens of Numenor during the Second Age. As well as being the most highly civilized human civilization ever in Middle-earth, Numenor was also noted for allowing female rulers as well. And the fact that they made no difference of sex is brought out much later during the Third Age during a dispute between their descendants living in Arnor and Gondor. So all this being said, what is the philosophy behind the spectrum within the world of Middle-earth? I think to start out with, it's worth noting that Middle-earth is a very violent universe. Fans aren't thinking about farmers and fishermen when they hear the fictional world mentioned. For example, the High Elves seem to not have any female rulers in their own terms, with Galadriel being the sole exception. And the only reason for that being that she was the only remaining Noldor noble left alive by the Third Age. Within elves that live within Middle-earth and were not High Elves, there's more ambiguity at play about what roles both genders played during times of war. Among the humans in Middle-earth, there's much more of a greater spectrum, as one might expect. The aforementioned Halidin of the First Age didn't mind female chieftains apparently. Meanwhile, in the northern region of where the Halidin lived, the people of Dorlomin noted their women as being both strong-willed, harsh, and extremely loyal. When their land is overrun by the forces of Morgoth, there's a possibility that they may have fought alongside their spouses when they were fighting as guerrillas, given that they were now living on hard times, before they were eventually sent away to safer places, even though this was against their will and they wanted to stay with their husbands. In the Third Age, the enemies of Gondor, the Wainwriters, are said to have trained everyone to fight, not just the men. This included old men, women, children, the whole nine. And, of course, there are the Shield Maidens of Rohan, implying that there was a martial history of female warriors within that culture as well. However, most of this information is something only hardcore fans would know of. It's not seen on screen, like the characters of Eowyn, Arwen, and Galadriel. And I think that's the crux of it. Arwen and Galadriel had played major roles, but because the real action was on the front lines, they didn't get any of the attention or the glory, and many people wanted the glory. Arwen making one of the greatest sacrifices of Middle-earth doesn't matter, because she wasn't holding a sword. And this fan desire for female characters to play a more active role, as well as an important one, can be seen both in the Fellowship, with Arwen saving Frodo at the river instead of within the books being the character of Glorfindel, as well as the Hobbit movies with the introduction of the elf warrior captain of Tauriel, and just recently with Amazon Prime's new show, The Rings of Power, a portrayal of Galadriel as being a frontline soldier rather than a traveling noble princess. And while for the most part, I don't really see a problem with this personally, I do think it's also missing one of the major points that Middle-earth tends to make in both the movies and the books. And it's perhaps the overarching philosophy of within Middle-earth as well, i.e. being that war is a very bad thing. It's not glorious or to be sought after unless you're perhaps evil. And the people who are fighting the wars are usually trying to defend themselves, manipulated into it. The roles that women played across the history of Middle-earth and the philosophy behind it was determined by the circumstance. Neither men nor women actively wanted to seek out combat if they had a choice, but rather were usually coerced into it. So essentially, that if people had to choose between being a housebody and a soldier, they're going to choose the former, regardless of their sex.